the TikTok meltdown is now growing with every single moment that we are on the air. We're going to talk to Peter Hitchens about it in a moment. But Peter, I want you to have a look at this. This is the Meltdown Montage, as we call it. Goodness gracious me. I mean, I'm sorry to throw this at you, Peter, but what has happened to humanity? Why can people not accept that somebody has given somebody the right to be in charge of a country that they don't agree with?
Well, I'm not sure about that. I think that a rational discussion of this would be nice, actually, from both directions. I'm not at all sure, for instance, that from the simple position of Britain, regardless of how it's currently governed, an America First type government with high tariff barriers is necessarily going to be good for us, nor, as you know, am I an enthusiast for the so-called special relationship, a non-existent alliance between a very powerful country to which we are heavily indebted and a very weak and declining country, which we are, which has not seemed to me to do us much good. So I'm not particularly anxious to suck up to the American president, whomever he or she may be, nor do I think that our relationship with America should be one of poodle-like yearning affection, which some people seem to want it to be. So I'm not. I suppose I would class myself as being similar to the conservatives in America who describe themselves as never Trumpers. Yes. I've never been impressed by this man. I don't like what I see of him. And although he's the most skillful politician since the late Princess Diana of Wales, he is not by any means a pleasant or kind or particularly moral man. So I don't rejoice at his arrival. When I see people like Carla Danier, well, obviously it's miserable for people like that to have someone like this elected. That I suppose in itself is a sort of encouragement to conservatives that it upsets liberals, particularly Green zealots, that he's in office. But how much will actually happen? I don't think that from the global point of view, his last term in office was particularly encouraging for conservatives, and I'm not sure this one will be either. And he will, assuming all things are equal, he will undoubtedly be a more effective president this time around because he's hugely more experienced in how to be president. So we'll see much more about what he's really like in the next 4 years than we did in his first 4-year term.
Yeah, I think so. And I know that you've never been a big fan of his, and you've been very consistent with that, but I just wonder why it is that people feel the need to be so kind of polarised. I mean, I will say to people that you shouldn't really have faith in politicians, first of all, anyway, because
well, no, you shouldn't. You're right.
They're not going to make your... I mean, they might be able to influence what happens in your life, but you should make your own life, and you should make your own way through that life, and you should do the best that you can for yourself and your family, and you should try not to pay any attention to politicians as little as possible, at least. And so I don't understand. I fail to understand why people can either be so delighted and carried away with the sort of enthusiasm of what's going to happen, or similarly terribly depressed about it, as people seem to be.
Mike, it's partly because of the death of religion. Yeah. People place enormous amounts of faith in governments and in politicians, which they really oughtn't to do. You're right. We are ultimately responsible for living our own lives. It is also true that in the modern world, governments interfere far more in our private lives than they ever used to. It would astonish a British person of a century ago to know just how much government interferes in their lives, and even in the United States. A part of the reason for the Trump revolt was I was hearing the other day this extraordinary thing about the Amish who try and live more or less independent lives rather impressively in the United States, finding themselves the victims of stupid regulations which made such independent lives increasingly impossible. Right. And that the United States has taken this series of very wrong turns, which it needs to put right. And a lot of people feel that Donald Trump might be able to do that. I suspect they'll be disappointed in reality because he's not that kind of he's really not that kind of politician. But I think that there is an enormous amount of faith now placed in politicians, and of course its counterpart, the anti-faith of people who are dismayed, who see their political god dies when Kamala Harris fails to win the election, and they're profoundly disappointed and upset by it. Far too much, but again, it's understandable given how much politics reaches into our lives. The green zealotry, for instance, which is in our lives at the moment, has an enormous impact on all of us, not merely increasing the costs of everything, but also undermining our industrial and economic prosperity in a significant way. And during this week, anybody who's looked at the energy dashboard, which anybody can go on. I
saw that you've been putting that out this week.
Yeah, you just see that it just demonstrates that there are times of year, and this is one of them, when wind will not produce any energy, and we only survive by immense use of gas, which everybody pretends is a green fuel when it isn't, and by importing energy. Quite amusingly, we import energy from the Netherlands, which still generates quite a lot of its electricity using, would you believe it, coal.
Yeah.
One very large coal-fired power station near Rotterdam. I went past it a few months ago.
Yes, I mean, that is the problem. But funnily enough, the Green Zealots, like the leader of the Green Party, Carla Denyer, called Donald Trump a fascist, but those are the ones who want to impose a way of life on us that we haven't actually, one, voted for, or two, asked for, which sounds to be far more fascist than anything Donald Trump does.
Well, I think the use of the word fascist, George Orwell long ago pointed out, is completely empty of meaning. It's just another word for bad, and people who are politically illiterate tend to use it rather a lot. There are specific circumstances. I think one could say, for instance, that Marine Le Pen's movement in France has fascist roots and tendencies, and it wouldn't be. But to call Trump a fascist is to give him a sophistication he doesn't have. What he is he's an instinctive populist politician, the first in the United States since a figure everyone's forgotten now, the terrifying but brilliant politician Huey Long of Louisiana, who Roosevelt greatly feared in the 1930s might become a very dangerous populist national leader. He would have been quite like Trump, I think, and he's smarter. But this kind of thing does arise, and it arises when mainstream politics fails of the right and of the left. And this is the problem that I've been warning against for a long time. People are extremely rude to me when I suggest ameliorations rather than solutions to the problems of the country, and call me all kinds of rude names. I say to them, look, you think I'm terrible, you call me a fascist and a Nazi, all kinds of other rubbish, but you wait and see what happens if you ignore people, civilized, rule of law Democrats like me, who are traditional Christian conservatives. You see what happens if you carry on ignoring what we say. And I've said this, and what I thought would happen was something like Donald Trump, and here he is, and I can't rejoice over it. Very interesting piece by my colleague Stephen Glover in the Daily Mail today, a conservative critique of Trump, which I think is very much worth reading.
Yes, we shall certainly check that out. Peter, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Peter Hitchens, columnist at the Mail on Sunday.